The planet Kepri had always been considered a backwater jewel of the outer reach. It had oceans that shimmered like sapphires beneath twin suns, mountains streaked with veins of pale metal, and forests that grew higher than human skyscrapers. Yet for all its beauty, it remained a quiet colony, a place for settlers who wanted distance from the crowded trade routes and the constant noise of the inner systems. It was here, on this seemingly untouched frontier world, that the first sign of something far older than humanity was uncovered. The excavation began as nothing more than a survey mission, ordered by the Colonial Council after several miners complained of strange readings in their instruments. Beneath the surface of one of the great obsidian mesas, their drills had struck against something harder than stone, something that rang with an unnatural resonance, as though hollow chambers hid behind the rock. Captain Elias Rain stood at the lip of the excavation pit, watching the dig teams operate their massive cutting lasers. Dust plumes rose into the hot air, catching the sunlight in shimmering waves. Rain had been a soldier once, before choosing the quieter life of frontier security. He did not expect danger here. Pirates rarely ventured so far into the reach, and the settlers were a peaceful sort. Still, his instincts had been restless since the miners had first sounded their alarms. One of the surveyors, a thin woman with streaks of silver in her hair, clambered up from the pit and hurried to him. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. "Captain, you need to see this," she said breathlessly. "We have broken through, and it is not natural." Rain followed her down into the pit. The air grew cooler as they descended, until at last they stood before a yawning crack in the mesa wall. Beyond it was darkness, a tunnel too smooth, too precise, to have been formed by any natural process. The laser cutters had revealed the edge of a vast structure buried deep within the mountain. "What is it?" Rain asked, though he already suspected the answer. The surveyor swallowed. "It is a construct, not human." Rain drew closer. He brushed his gloved hand across the smooth surface of the alien wall, feeling the faint hum beneath. It was not simply stone, it was some material beyond his understanding, still alive with power even after untold centuries of burial. Word spread quickly. By the next rotation, scholars and scientists from across the reach were arriving, their transports crowding the once sleepy landing fields. They came with drones, scanners, and endless curiosity. They spoke in hushed voices about the possibilities, that this was the first true evidence of a pre-human civilization of great advancement. Within days, the colony's council chambers were filled with debate. Some feared the discovery, urging that the structure remain sealed until more was known. Others demanded it be opened, arguing that humanity had a right to know what lay hidden beneath their feet. It was the voice of Professor Aleth Morian, one of the most renowned xenohistorians, that tipped the scales. "We stand at the threshold of history," she declared before the assembled council. "Every myth, every whisper of an ancient people who once walked among the stars, it may all begin here. To turn away would be to blind ourselves. Humanity has always thrived by stepping into the unknown." And so the decision was made. The gates would be breached. The chamber that opened before them was vast beyond measure. As the explorers' light swept across it, they revealed towering pillars that seemed to stretch into infinity. The floor was inscribed with patterns that pulsed faintly, as if reacting to the presence of living beings. At the chamber's heart lay a structure like an altar, though no religion of humanity could claim resemblance to it. Upon the altar rested a sphere, smooth and black as obsidian, yet it shimmered faintly with shifting constellations, as though the night sky itself had been captured within. Professor Morian approached it with trembling hands. This is a memory core. I have seen fragments of such things in ancient records, but never intact. It may hold the history of its makers." The scientists worked feverishly, surrounding the sphere with instruments, mapping its surface, probing its energy fields. Days turned into weeks. Each discovery only led to more questions. And then, one night, the sphere awakened. It began with a low hum that resonated through the chamber, causing the very walls to tremble. The constellations within the sphere flared to life, swirling into intricate patterns. Streams of light arced upward, forming shapes, towering figures of alien design, their features sharp and regal, their eyes glowing with disdainful fire. A voice filled the chamber. It was not spoken in any tongue known to humankind, yet somehow it pressed itself into the minds of all present, understood not through translation, but through imposition. "We are the Vila," the voice thundered. "We were here before your kind crawled from the mud of your world. We shaped the stars, we commanded empires, we shattered nations with a thought. You who dare trespass in our sanctum, know this, we are not gone, we have merely slept. And now, because of you, we awaken." The projection ended in a burst of light so intense that many fell to their knees, covering their eyes. When it faded, the sphere lay silent once more, but something had changed. In the skies above Kepri, instruments began to register disturbances. A ripple through the void, as though something vast and ancient was stirring across the stars. Rain stood with Professor Morian as the readings poured in. His voice was low, grim. "We have not just uncovered history, we have called it back." The first Vela vessel arrived 3 weeks later. It appeared in orbit without warning, slipping from the darkness of faster-than-light travel with predatory grace. It was unlike any human craft, angular, black as the void, adorned with burning lines of crimson that pulsed like veins. Its mere presence disrupted communications, disabled satellites, and sent shockwaves of fear through the colony below. Rain watched from the command post as the ship hung in the heavens. For hours it remained still, a silent sentinel. Then, without a word of warning, it struck. Beams of energy unlike anything human science could comprehend lanced from the alien ship, tearing through orbital platforms and defense grids as if they were paper. Settlements burned in moments, entire districts reduced to ash. The Vela made no demands, issued no communication. Their actions were message enough. When at last their voice came, it was broadcast across every channel, echoing in every language of humanity. "You are an infestation. You grow unchecked, unworthy of the stars you trespass upon. We are the Vela, rightful rulers of the galaxy. You will kneel or you will burn." Humanity's war for survival had begun. And though the Vela believed themselves eternal masters, they had yet to learn the truth that would echo across the ages, that humanity, when pushed to the edge, when threatened with extinction, became something that no empire, no ancient power could ever truly conquer. For humanity did not kneel, humanity fought. The first days of war were filled with silence, broken only by the sound of distant mourning. On Kepri, entire districts lay smoldering, blackened husks of what had once been thriving settlements. Families clawed through the rubble, searching for survivors, though few were found. The Vela ship had struck with surgical cruelty, erasing defense grids, silencing communications, and leaving behind only fear. Captain Elias Rain walked among the ruins with his security detachment. His once pristine uniform was caked with ash and blood. He had no orders beyond keeping what remained of the colony alive, but even that felt futile. Against power like this, what hope could human weapons provide? Professor Aleth Morian joined him among the wreckage. Her hair was wild, her eyes hollow from sleepless nights. Yet beneath the exhaustion was fire, a stubborn spark that refused to die. "They mean to erase us," she said softly as she stepped over a charred beam. "Not to conquer, to erase." Rain's jaw tightened. "Then they have already failed. We are still here." When news of the attack reached the inner systems, humanity erupted in panic. For centuries, humans had expanded into the stars, believing themselves the only sentient species bold enough to lay claim to the galaxy. There had been whispers of ruins, fragments of technology, but nothing living. The Vela changed that in an instant. Emergency councils formed. Fleets were mobilized. Every admiral, every strategist spoke with the same conviction: humanity must fight or humanity would die. The first armada was assembled at the colony world of Celeste Prime, a shining hub of trade and culture. It was a fleet of nearly 200 ships, drawn from every corner of human space, frigates, cruisers, carriers, vessels barely retrofitted for war. Humanity had not known a true interstellar conflict since its earliest days of expansion. The Vela would be there first. The Armada never reached Kepri. Admiral Thane's flagship, the Resolute Dawn, led the fleet through the void, confidence high among the crews. They believed numbers would bring victory, that courage would bridge the gap between their weapons and the alien unknown. But when the Vela struck, all illusions shattered. The alien fleet arrived without warning, dark ships bleeding from the void like shadows given form. They moved with terrifying precision, their weapons silent arcs of light that tore through human vessels as though they were fragile glass. Rain watched the battle unfold from Kepri's surface, transmitted through fractured channels. He saw ships he had once served on vanish in bursts of fire. He heard the cries of officers begging for reinforcements, for orders, for anything to stop the slaughter. It was over within an hour. Of 200 human ships, fewer than 30 limped away. The Vela voice came again, cold and merciless. "You cannot stand against us. You are children playing with fire. Surrender and some may live. Resist and all will die." But humanity did not surrender. In the days that followed, scattered survivors began to gather. Commanders who had lost their fleets refused to yield. Colonies whose skies had burned vowed vengeance instead of submission. Messages crackled across the stars, uniting voices that had long been divided by politics, distance, and pride. For the first time in history, humanity spoke as one people. On Kepri, Professor Morian stood once more before the Black Sphere, the Vela Memory Core. Her team worked tirelessly, probing its secrets, desperate for any advantage. Rain often visited, though he understood little of the science. What mattered was the determination in their eyes. "We have discovered fragments," Morian explained one night, her hands shaking from exhaustion as she gestured to the glowing console. "Records of the Vela's wars. They fought countless species before us. Every one of them fell. The Vela did not simply conquer, they annihilated. Entire civilizations erased." "Then why are they gone?" Rain asked. Morian met his gaze. "That is the question. Something brought them down. Something ended their reign. If we can find it, perhaps we can survive." While scholars hunted for answers, soldiers bled among the stars. The Vela advanced across the Reach, burning colony after colony. Human fleets scrambled to respond, but their weapons were outdated, their tactics primitive against an enemy that had waged war before humanity had learned fire. At the colony of Asterion, human forces made their first stand. Commodore Hale commanded a fleet of 70 ships, positioned in orbit with every gun primed. The Vela descended upon them with 10 ships. "Only 10. Hold the line," Hale roared as the alien vessels closed in. "Show them we are not prey." The battle was brutal. Human torpedoes and railguns lit the void, striking the Vela ships in a storm of fire. For a moment, it seemed victory was possible. 2 alien vessels faltered under the barrage, their hulls cracking with molten light. But then the Vela revealed their true power. Energy cascades rippled from their ships, waves of distortion that tore through human fleets like invisible storms. Shields collapsed, hulls twisted, entire vessels shredded into fragments. Commodore Hale's flagship broke apart with thousands still aboard, her final orders a scream of defiance lost to static. When it ended, only a handful of human ships fled into the darkness. Asterion's colonies were left defenseless, consumed in fire. The galaxy trembled. Humanity, for all its pride, faced the reality of extinction. Yet among the ruins, whispers began to spread, whispers of resistance, of defiance, of something more. In the aftermath of Asterion, one of the surviving captains broadcast a message across every channel she could reach. Her name was Lyra Kalin, a woman of no great rank, her ship little more than a corvette scarred by battle, but her words carried across the stars. "They call us children, they call us unworthy, but we are human, we do not bow, we do not break. Let the Vela hear us, we will fight. We will bleed and we will endure. For every world they burn, 10 more will rise. For every life they take, 1,000 will swear vengeance. They think themselves eternal. We will show them eternity belongs to us. Her message spread like wildfire. Soldiers repeated it in their bunkers. Refugees whispered it among the ashes. Even the weary counselors of the inner world spoke it in their chambers. For the first time since the Veela's return, hope stirred. On Kepri, Rain listened to the message in silence. He looked to the sky where the stars burned with cold fire. They think us weak, he murmured, but they do not know us, not yet. Beside him, Professor Morian placed a hand on the memory core. Then let us show them. The Veela pressed their war, but for the first time, they faced not only resistance, but defiance. Humanity refused to die quietly. Small fleets struck at Veela patrols. Colonies hidden in asteroid belts harbored refugees and armed them for battle. Guerrilla tactics, sabotage, desperate stands, they began to slow the ancient enemy's advance. And as the Veela waged their war, they began to learn the truth that would echo across the ages. Humanity was not like the others they had destroyed. Humanity was something new, something dangerous, something they could not easily break. The war had burned for months, and everywhere the Veela passed, they left only ruin. Yet amid the devastation, seeds of resistance took root. Humanity had been divided for centuries by politics, wealth, and distance, but the Veela threat carved through those divisions with fire. Worlds that had once bickered over trade tariffs now forged weapons together. Colonies that had hidden behind the shields of neutrality now sent their sons and daughters to the fleet. Even the most distant outposts, forgotten by the inner councils, now raised their banners in defiance. It was not unity born of choice. It was unity born of survival. Captain Elia's reign had been promoted almost against his will. When the Colonial Council of Kepri declared they would arm every ship and soldier they could, his name rose naturally to the forefront. He had fought during the first attacks. He had kept order when chaos threatened, and above all, he carried the calm of a man who refused to break. Now he commanded the frigate Iron Wind, a warship hastily retrofitted from a mining vessel. Its hull bore the scars of countless repairs, its weapons a patchwork of railguns, missiles, and experimental energy cannons rushed into service. It was not elegant, but it was deadly in the hands of a determined crew. Beside him, Professor Aleth Morian had become an unlikely strategist. Her study of the Veela memory core continued, but more than that, she had grown into a voice of purpose. Her knowledge of the Veela, limited though it was, made her invaluable. She traveled with Rain, advising where she could, urging caution where others cried for reckless assault. Together, they sailed into the fire. The first glimmer of hope came in the Seraph Belt, a scattering of asteroids rich in minerals. The Veela had begun constructing forward bases there, building platforms from which to launch deeper raids. Humanity could not allow it. Rain's task force was small, 7 ships, most barely holding together, but they had something the Veela did not expect: adaptability. The battle began with silence. Rain ordered his ships to drift cold, engines powered down, masked among the asteroids. The Veela ships glided in perfect formation, their black hulls gleaming with crimson veins. They did not anticipate resistance. When the trap was sprung, it was sudden and brutal. Human ships erupted from the asteroid shadows, launching a storm of missiles and railgun fire. The Veela, accustomed to enemies who charged blindly into their superior firepower, faltered. One of their cruisers erupted in fire, torn apart before its shields could fully activate. Another ship was crippled by concentrated torpedo strikes. The Veela counterattacked with their devastating energy cascades, but this time the humans did not scatter. They adapted, splitting their formations, weaving between the asteroids, forcing the enemy to overextend. Rain stood on the command deck of the Iron Wind, his voice steady. "Keep the pressure, strike and fade, make them bleed." Hours later, the battle was won. 4 Veela ships destroyed, 2 driven to retreat. Humanity had its first true victory. The message spread across the stars like wildfire: the Veela could be beaten. In the inner worlds, Councils replayed the footage again and again. In the outer colonies, children sang songs of the Seraph Belt. Across every ship and station, the story became legend in days. For the first time since the war began, hope was not just whispered, it was shouted. The Vila took notice. Their retaliation came swift and merciless. A fleet twice the size of Rain's task force descended on the Seraph Belt, determined to erase the insult. But when they arrived, they found not scattered miners and desperate frigates, but a growing fleet. Human ships poured in from every direction, drawn by the beacon of the first victory. The Vila found themselves swarmed, their formation broken by sheer numbers, their superior firepower overwhelmed by relentless strikes. For every human ship destroyed, two more rose in fury. The Vila withdrew. It was not a rout, but neither was it a victory. For the first time in millennia, the ancient race felt the sting of resistance. Far from the front lines, Professor Morian continued her study of the memory core. She had uncovered fragments, half-buried images of the Vila's past wars. She saw them crushing empires that spanned hundreds of systems, burning worlds that had risen with hope, erasing civilizations that might have rivaled their own. But she also saw cracks. One fragment showed a war not easily won. A species of towering insectoid creatures, the Karath, had resisted for centuries before falling. The Vila had won, but at staggering cost. Another fragment showed internal strife, Vila ships firing upon each other, voices raised in defiance against their own kind. And at last she found a single phrase, repeated across countless fragments, always ending in silence, the hunger within. She did not yet understand it, but she knew it mattered. Meanwhile, humanity adapted in ways the Vila did not expect. Soldiers studied the alien energy cascades, learning how to disrupt them with bursts of electromagnetic interference. Engineers stripped captured fragments of Vila technology, grafting them onto human ships with reckless ingenuity. Pilots trained not in rigid formations, but in chaos, turning disorder into advantage. The Vila fought with the weight of ancient doctrine, perfected over millennia. Humanity fought with desperation, invention, and fury. And slowly, impossibly, the balance began to shift. At the Battle of New Dawn Station, humanity achieved what no other race had ever done. They captured a Vila ship intact. It had been a fierce fight. The Vila vessel had been crippled by concentrated torpedo fire, its engines gutted. Instead of finishing it, Rain ordered a boarding action. His Marines stormed the ship, fighting room by room against alien constructs and automated defenses. The Vila crew were unlike anything humans had faced, tall, angular beings with features carved like stone, their eyes glowing with a cold in a fire. They fought with contempt, moving with elegance and precision, yet they bled and they died. When the fighting ended, the Vila ship was theirs. Humanity tore into it like wolves, studying its systems, prying open its secrets. Professor Morian stood aboard the captured vessel, her hands trembling as she touched its strange controls. This is their pride, and we have taken it. They will never forgive us. Rain's reply was grim. Then we will give them more to hate. News of the capture spread even faster than news of the Seraph Belt. Humanity, once the hunted, now hunted in return. Vila ships no longer passed through human space unchallenged. Colonies once marked for destruction now stood their ground, their skies bristling with weapons. The Vila had awoken to crush a fledgling race. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous, a species that learned, that adapted, that refused to die. And though the war was far from over, though the Vila still held power beyond imagining, one truth had become undeniable. Humanity would not go quietly into extinction. They would rise. The Vila did not take humiliation lightly. The loss at the Seraph Belt and the capture of one of their ships spread through their ranks like a festering wound. They had crushed empires before humanity had learned to shape iron, and none had ever dared to seize their vessels intact. None had ever forced them to retreat. The response was inevitable. The Vila came not as raiders this time, but as an armada. 50 ships, their hulls blazing with crimson fire, descended upon the human colony of Meridian. The colony had grown bold after hearing of humanity's victories. Its skies bristled with weapons, its defenders swore they would not fall. They lasted less than a day. The Vila did not strike with surgical precision as before. They unleashed devastation on a scale humanity had never witnessed. Entire continents burned, oceans boiled, cities were reduced to glowing ash. When it was over, Meridian was gone. Across the stars, the Vila voice spoke once more. You believe yourselves strong, you believe yourselves clever. Know this, your defiance will not save you. For every ship you steal, for every strike you make, 100 worlds will burn. We are the Vila, we do not fall. The massacre sent shockwaves through humanity. Some called for surrender, arguing that resistance would only doom more worlds. Others answered with fury, vowing that Meridian's ashes would be repaid tenfold. On the bridge of the Iron Wind, Captain Elia's reign felt both grief and rage as reports streamed in. Meridian had been a thriving colony, a jewel of human expansion. Now it was nothing but a graveyard. Professor Aleth Morian stood beside him, her face pale. They wanted to remind us of what they are, not conquerors, eradicators. Rain's voice was quiet, but steel lay beneath it. Then we will remind them of what we are. The war escalated. Vila fleets swept across the Reach, their campaigns calculated to crush hope wherever it flared. Yet humanity did not bow. Instead, they adapted again. They did not meet the Vila in open battle, where their superior firepower reigned supreme. They struck from the shadows, ambushing supply ships, sabotaging outposts, turning every asteroid field and gas giant into a battlefield. The Vila had mastered the art of annihilation. Humanity was mastering the art of survival. Still, the cost was staggering. Millions died. Entire colonies vanished. The fleet bled ship after ship. Every victory seemed to birth two more defeats. It was in this crucible of despair that Professor Morian made her breakthrough. The memory core had become her world. She ate beside it, slept beside it, her mind consumed by the fragments of Vila history it revealed. Patterns emerged in the chaos, pieces that did not align with the Vila's image of eternal supremacy. Again and again, the fragments whispered the same words, the hunger within. At last she found the key. It came in the form of a recording, half-broken, its images flickering like dying flame. A Vila stood before a gathering of his kind, his features drawn with fear. They do not see it, the figure said. They believe our conquest's eternal, our power absolute, but we are not whole. The hunger grows. It devours us from within. We consume and consume until nothing remains, and when nothing remains, it will consume us. The recording ended in static. Morian stared at it for hours, her mind racing. Slowly, the truth began to form. The Vila were not gods. They were predators, predators bound to an endless cycle. They consumed civilizations not only for conquest, but for survival. Their power was not limitless. It required fuel, sustenance, constant war. Without it, they weakened. Without it, they starved. The hunger within was not a weapon, it was their curse. She brought her findings to Rain and the fleet's commanders. They are not invincible, she declared, her voice raw with urgency. Their power is not eternal. They require constant conquest to sustain themselves. That is why they erase entire civilizations, because they need to, they cannot stop. And if we can deny them their feast, if we can bleed them without allowing them to consume, they will falter. The council chamber erupted in debate. Some scoffed, others demanded proof, but Rain's gaze never left Morian's. You believe this is their weakness, he said. I know it is, she answered. It is the reason they disappeared from history. They devoured too much too quickly. They consumed themselves. We must make them repeat their mistake. From that moment, humanity's strategy shifted. They no longer fought to win battles outright. They fought to deny. Every time the Vila struck at a colony, its people were evacuated, its resources stripped, its skies poisoned with traps. The Vila took worlds, but found them barren. Their victories yielded nothing. Human fleets harried them constantly, refusing to engage in decisive battles, striking only to wound and withdraw. The Vila, hungry for conquest, found themselves gnashing at shadows. The ancient enemy grew frustrated, and for the first time, cracks began to show. One such crack appeared at the Battle of Halcyon Rift. The Vela fleet, 30 strong, pursued what they believed was a small human convoy. In truth, it was bait. The convoy led them into the rift, a region of unstable space where gravity tides warped sensors and navigation. There, Rain's fleet struck. Dozens of human ships emerged from hidden positions, bombarding the Vela with relentless fire. The enemy retaliated with devastating force, but the rift itself turned against them. Gravity tides twisted their formations, disrupted their energy cascades, forced them into disarray. By the battle's end, 12 Vela ships burned. The humans withdrew before the rest could regroup, leaving the rift littered with wreckage. It was not a decisive victory, but it was enough. For the first time, Vela commanders were heard arguing among themselves. Their discipline faltered. Their hunger grew. Professor Morian watched the reports with grim satisfaction. They are unraveling, slowly but surely. They cannot endure a war of attrition. They will consume themselves just as before. Rain nodded, though his eyes were heavy with weariness. But how many of us will fall before they do? Her reply was quiet, but unwavering. As many as it takes. The Vela counteroffensive raged on, but the tide had begun to shift. They had awakened believing themselves eternal masters of the stars. Instead, they found themselves caught in a war they could not win quickly, against an enemy that grew stronger with every loss. Humanity had discovered the truth. The Vela were not gods, they were starving beasts, and humanity had no intention of feeding them. The galaxy was burning, but for the first time, humanity burned with purpose rather than despair. The revelation of the hunger within spread quickly through the ranks of soldiers, scholars, and leaders. Humanity now knew the Vela were not gods. They were predators bound by need, and predators could be starved, hunted, brought low. But scattered victories and isolated resistance would not be enough. To survive, humanity needed unity greater than any it had ever known. On the ancient halls of Atlas Prime, a planet once dedicated to peace and diplomacy, the first true war council of humanity convened. Representatives from the inner worlds, scarred veterans of the Reach, governors of distant colonies, admirals who had watched their fleets burn, all gathered beneath a single banner. It was not the banner of a nation, nor a corporation, nor a political bloc. It was the banner of humankind itself. At the heart of the council stood Captain Elias Rain, though he carried no official title. He was no politician, no diplomat, but his name had spread across the stars, tied to victories at the Seraph Belt and Halcyon Rift. He had become a symbol, and symbols carried weight. Beside him stood Professor Aleth Morian, the woman whose mind had cracked the Vela's secret. She too had become a legend, known as the Keeper of the Core. The council chamber was alive with voices, a storm of debate. Some called for immediate counterattacks, striking deep into Vela territory. Others demanded caution, fearing overreach. Still others argued for protecting the core colonies above all else. It was Rain's voice that silenced the chamber. We cannot win this war by hiding. We cannot win it by protecting our borders while they devour the Reach. Every day we wait, more of our people die. The Vela believe they can consume us until nothing remains. Let us starve them instead. Let us strike at their supply lines, their forges, their breeding grounds. We cannot meet them blow for blow, but we can bleed them. And if we bleed them long enough, their own hunger will devour them. Morian stepped forward, her voice cutting through the silence. We face an enemy older than history itself. They have crushed countless civilizations, but they have never faced us. They do not understand what we are capable of. They think us fragile because we are new, but we are strong because we are new. We learn, we adapt, we endure. That is our strength. That is why we will win. For a long moment, silence filled the chamber. Then one by one, voices rose in agreement. And so the War Council was born. The first campaign of the United Fleets was codenamed Operation Ashen Star. Its goal was simple in words, impossible in scope: strike at the Vela strongholds that fueled their war. The Vela had bases hidden deep within nebulae, shipyards orbiting black holes, forges built into shattered moons. These places were the heart of their power, the engines of their endless conquest. If humanity could cripple them, the Vila hunger would grow sharper, their fleets thinner, their empire weaker. The first target was the Droskar Forge. The Droskar Forge was a horror of engineering, a moon hollowed into a factory, its surface scarred with molten rivers of slag. Vila ships drifted in orbit like vultures, feeding upon the forge's lifeblood. It was here that the enemy built their war machines, shaping black holes that would burn human skies. The War Council's fleet numbered 60 ships, drawn from every corner of human space. It was the largest force humanity had ever assembled. At its head was the Iron Wind, scarred but unbroken. As the fleet approached the forge, tension hung like a blade over every deck. They knew the Vila would not surrender their lifeblood easily, and indeed, the Vila came. 30 ships, swift and merciless, rising from the shadows of the forge to meet the human fleet. The battle that followed was chaos incarnate. Human ships swarmed like hornets, striking from every angle. Vila cruisers unleashed cascades of energy, tearing through formations, but the humans adapted, splitting, weaving, striking back with torpedoes and railguns. The forge itself shuddered as human bombardments tore into its surface, igniting chain reactions that lit the void. On the bridge of the Iron Wind, Rain gave his orders with calm precision. Press the flank, break their formation. Do not give them room to breathe. For every human ship destroyed, another surged forward to fill the gap. Crews fought with desperation, knowing that their survival depended not just on victory, but on denial. At last, the forge cracked. Its molten heart erupted, consuming ships caught too close, tearing the moon apart in a storm of fire. The Vila fleet withdrew, bleeding, their pride wounded. The Droskar Forge was no more. The victory sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Humanity had not merely survived. They had struck at the very heart of the Vila war machine and won. For the first time, the Vila voice did not thunder across human channels. They were silent, and that silence was more terrifying than any threat. Professor Morian studied the aftermath with growing unease. She had expected rage, retribution, perhaps even overextension. Instead, the Vila withdrew into shadow. Their fleets struck less often, their presence diminished. They are not broken, she said quietly to Rain as the fleet celebrated. They are waiting, watching. We have hurt them, but we have not defeated them. Their hunger grows sharper with every day we deny them. Sooner or later, they will come with all they have. Rain looked out at the burning remains of the forge. His expression was grim. Then we had better be ready. The War Council wasted no time. Emboldened by the victory at Droskar, they launched further campaigns. Vila supply routes were severed. Outposts burned. Human fleets pushed deeper than ever before. For every colony lost, a Vila stronghold fell. For every human life taken, a Vila shipyard was destroyed. And slowly, impossibly, the war began to turn. But the Vila were not finished. Far from it. In the deepest reaches of space, where human sensors could not yet reach, they gathered, ships larger than anything humanity had seen before, weapons capable of rending entire worlds. They had faced defiance, they had bled, but they had not forgotten what they were. They were the Vila, the rulers of the First Age, and they would remind humanity why all who had come before them had fallen. For weeks after the fall of the Droskar Forge, the galaxy was eerily quiet. Vila patrols that once haunted the Reach vanished. Their raids ceased. Human colonies, accustomed to the constant shadow of annihilation, looked to the skies with something approaching relief. Children played outside without fear of bombardment. Fleets patrolled space without ambush. But for Captain Elias Rain and Professor Aleth Morian, the silence was no comfort. On the bridge of the Iron Wind, Rain leaned against the command rail, staring at the empty void beyond the viewport. "They are not gone," he said. "They are waiting." Morian, standing beside him, nodded. "The Vila have never known denial. We have cut off their forges, their supply lines, their harvests. The hunger gnaws at them now, and predators are never more dangerous than when starving." She turned her gaze to the stars, her voice low. "They are preparing something something greater than anything we have faced. Her fears were confirmed days later. Deep space sensors, scattered across the outer rim, began to detect disturbances, massive fluctuations in gravity wells, ripples across the fabric of the void itself. At first, the War Council thought it was a natural event, a collapse of distant stars. Then the transmissions came. Entire scouting fleets vanished without a trace. Outposts went silent, their last messages cut short by bursts of static. Merchant ships stumbled into shadows from which they never emerged. And then, at last, humanity saw it. The Vela Armada emerged at the edge of human space like a storm given flesh. It was a fleet unlike anything humanity had ever faced. Not dozens of ships, but hundreds, vessels so vast they blotted out the stars, their hulls burning with rivers of crimson light. At their center drifted leviathans, war machines larger than cities, their cores pulsing with raw power. The Vela voice thundered once more across every channel, every frequency, every human world. You defy us, you starve us, you believe yourselves strong, but you are nothing. We are the Vela, we are eternity. We will consume you as we consumed all who came before. This war ends now. Panic swept the human worlds. Colonies scrambled to evacuate. Fleets rushed to assemble, desperate to meet the storm before it fell upon the heart of humanity. The War Council convened in chaos. Admirals argued for retreat, for fallback positions closer to the inner systems. Governors screamed for fleets to defend their worlds. Some whispered surrender. Rain silenced them with words sharp as steel. If we run, they will burn every world we leave behind. If we scatter, they will devour us piece by piece. We cannot meet them with fear. We cannot meet them with weakness. We must meet them together. Here, now. Morian rose beside him, her eyes blazing with conviction. The Vela believe this war will end in our extinction. Let us show them it will end in theirs. And so humanity prepared for the greatest battle in its history. The War Council declared a rally at the star system of Aeon, a crossroads of trade routes and fortified bastions. Every surviving ship was summoned, every soldier called, every weapon pressed into service. Colonists volunteered to fight as gunners, engineers, medics. Children barely grown donned uniforms. The fleet that gathered was vast, more than 500 ships, a patchwork of frigates, cruisers, carriers, and retrofitted freighters. It was not elegant, not uniform, but it was human. At its center stood the Iron Wind, scarred and rebuilt more times than anyone could count. Its crew had become legends, and its captain a symbol. The days before the battle were heavy with silence. On the observation deck, Rain stood with Morian, gazing at the mass of ships arrayed in orbit. "Do you believe we can win?" he asked quietly. Morian's answer was measured, but certain. The Vela hunger makes them reckless. They believe sheer force will crush us, but they do not understand that every one of us fights for more than survival. We fight for every child on every world, for every colony reduced to ash, for every voice they tried to silence. They fight for hunger, we fight for life. That is why we can win. Rain's lips curved into the faintest ghost of a smile. Then we will give them the fight they will never forget. The Vela Armada arrived at Aeon in a storm of fire. Space itself seemed to twist as their leviathans emerged, flanked by endless lines of cruisers and destroyers. The void burned crimson as though the stars themselves bled. Humanity met them head-on. The opening clash was thunder and fury. Vela leviathans unleashed waves of energy that shattered shields and ripped through formations. Human ships scattered, weaving through the storm, striking back with missiles, torpedoes, railguns, and stolen fragments of Vela weaponry. The void became a graveyard of fire and wreckage. On the bridge of the Iron Wind, Rain gave his orders with relentless precision. "Hold the line, draw them in, do not break." The Vela pressed hard, their leviathans tearing through the front ranks. Entire human squadrons were erased in seconds, but humanity did not falter. They swarmed like hornets, striking at weak points, tearing at flanks, sacrificing themselves to cripple the enemy. Professor Morian relayed crucial intelligence across the fleet, identifying patterns in Vela tactics, vulnerabilities in their leviathans. strike the ventral cores. Their shields falter with each discharge. Time your volleys between the cascades. Bit by bit, the impossible began to happen. A Vela Leviathan shuddered under concentrated fire, its crimson veins dimming, until at last it ruptured in a cataclysmic explosion that lit the void for minutes. Human crews roared in defiance. For every world lost, for every life taken, this was vengeance. But the Vela did not waver. Their hunger drove them, their arrogance fueled them. For every Leviathan that fell, more pressed forward. Humanity was winning battles, but the cost was staggering. Ships broke apart, crews burned, the void filled with the screams of the dying. On the iron wind, alarms blared as enemy fire tore through its hull. Rain gripped the rail, steady as the ship shuddered. "We hold," he said through clenched teeth. "We hold no matter the cost." And humanity held. The battle raged for days, neither side yielding. Systems burned, planets scarred, the void choked with wreckage. It was not a single battle, but a campaign, a storm that consumed entire sectors. By the end of the first week, both sides had suffered losses beyond measure. The Vela Armada was bloodied, but humanity was battered, its fleets fractured, its colonies stretched thin. Yet still, they did not kneel. And in the shadows of the conflict, Morian uncovered something even more terrifying within the memory core, an echo of a truth too dangerous to ignore. The Vela were not fighting merely for dominance. They were fighting because their survival depended on consuming humanity. Without victory here, their hunger would consume them entirely. They were desperate, and desperation made them vulnerable. The war had become a storm of fire and ruin. For weeks, the battle at Ion raged across the stars. Human ships, battered and burning, fought with the fury of a cornered beast. Vela Leviathans pressed forward with unrelenting hunger, their crimson cores devouring everything in their path. Entire fleets had been reduced to ash. Entire worlds had been left smoldering behind the lines. And yet, humanity endured. Every day, battered frigates limped back into formation. Every day, new crews volunteered to man the guns of shattered ships. Every day, humanity looked into the abyss of extinction and spat defiance. The Vela had expected surrender. They had expected despair. They had expected humanity to kneel as countless other species had. Instead, they found only resistance. On the command bridge of the Iron Wind, Captain Elia's reign stood like stone, the weight of a galaxy pressing upon his shoulders. The air smelled of scorched metal and burned circuitry, and sparks rained from severed conduits as alarms screamed in every tone known to man. His hands gripped the rail as though holding the ship itself steady. Professor Aleth Morian stood beside him, her eyes locked on the tactical display that showed the battle raging across the void. Red markers for Vela ships crowded the map, vast in number, nearly overwhelming. Blue markers for human ships were few, scattered, bleeding, yet Morian's gaze was hard, unyielding. "We are not finished," she whispered. "No," Rain said. His voice was rough from hours without rest, but there was fire in it still. "Not while we still draw breath." Then, at last, the truth of the Vela was revealed. From the fragments of memory cores salvaged in desperate raids, Morian pieced together what the Vela had hidden for millennia. They were not eternal, as they claimed. They were dying. Their hunger was no simple desire for conquest, but a dependency woven into their very biology and technology. They consumed the life essence, the energy signatures of other sentient species, to fuel their vast machines and to sustain themselves. They had devoured countless civilizations before humanity, each feeding their endless cycle. But they had grown arrogant, lazy in their dominance. With each victory, with each feast, their own ability to endure dwindled. Now their hunger was not power, it was desperation. Without humanity's fall, the Vela would wither into dust. Morian's voice rang across the fleet as she broadcast the revelation. "They are not gods, they are not eternal, they are parasites at the edge of extinction. They seek to consume us because they must. If we deny them, if we destroy them, they will vanish from the stars forever." The words ignited a fire across the human fleet. Where there had been only grim determination, Now there was fury. Now there was hope. The War Council devised one final gambit, one last throw of the dice that would either save humanity or doom it entirely. At the heart of the Vela fleet loomed the greatest of their leviathans, an ancient vessel so vast it dwarfed cities, its surface a labyrinth of crimson veins, its core burning brighter than any star. It was the source, the nexus of their power, the origin from which their fleets drew strength. If it fell, the Vela would fall with it. But to reach it, humanity would have to carve through the full might of the Vela Armada, a task that would demand everything. Rain gave the order without hesitation. We strike the source, every ship, every weapon, every soul. Today we end them. The final battle began like the breaking of a dam. Human fleets surged forward in every direction, engines burning white-hot, weapons roaring in fury. Vela ships rose to meet them, a tide of crimson fire, their leviathans unleashing cascades of annihilation that tore through ranks and split the void itself. The two forces met in an explosion of steel and light. Ships shattered, debris spiraled into nothingness, and the void filled with the screams of war. The Iron Wind led the charge, diving into the thick of the battle, weaving between the crimson beams of Leviathan cannons. Rain barked orders without pause, his voice steady as death itself. Strike their flanks, shield the transports, push forward. Everywhere, humanity fought with savage desperation. Carriers launched wave after wave of fighters, each piloted by men and women who knew they had no chance of returning. Frigates rammed Vela cruisers, detonating their cores in suicide strikes that tore open gaps in enemy lines. Civilian freighters, retrofitted with weapons and armor, threw themselves into the fire as if born for it. The void became a canvas of sacrifice. Hours passed like centuries. Human fleets dwindled, but the Vela faltered as well. For every Leviathan that tore through human lines, another fell to relentless fire, its core rupturing in explosions that rippled across the stars. At last, the Iron Wind broke through. Ahead loomed the source, its immense body blotting out the starlight, its surface a writhing mass of crimson energy. It radiated hunger so vast it could be felt, a gnawing emptiness clawing at the mind. Rain stared at it, his jaw set. That is the heart of them. End it, and we end them. The battle around the source was beyond anything humanity had faced. Vela ships swarmed like hornets, shielding their master with suicidal devotion. Leviathans converged, unleashing torrents of annihilation. Human ships shattered by the dozens, their wreckage colliding in fields of fire. But humanity pressed on. The Iron Wind led a spearhead of survivors into the storm, its guns blazing, its hull bleeding flame. Professor Morian directed the fleet with surgical precision, identifying openings, exploiting every weakness, tearing holes in the enemy's defense. And then, at last, humanity reached the source itself. The plan was simple and terrible. The source's core could not be destroyed by weapons alone. It was too vast, too ancient, too steeped in the stolen essence of millennia. But it was unstable, swollen by centuries of hunger. If struck from within, its core could collapse, consuming itself in cataclysm. That meant boarding it. Rain volunteered without hesitation. "I will lead the strike," he said. His crew protested, but his eyes silenced them. "I have carried this war from the beginning. I will carry it to its end." Morian stepped forward, her voice steady. "And I will go with you. Knowledge has guided us this far. Knowledge must end it." Together, with a handful of soldiers, they boarded the source. Inside, the Leviathan was a nightmare. Its corridors pulsed like living flesh, its walls alive with veins of crimson light. The air vibrated with the whispers of countless voices, echoes of species long consumed. The Vela themselves emerged from the shadows, tall and gaunt, their eyes burning with hunger, their voices dripping with scorn. "You are children," they hissed. "You are prey. You cannot kill eternity." Rain answered with fire. The strike team fought through endless halls, every step bought with blood. Morian guided them deeper, her knowledge of Vela structures illuminating the path. At last, they reached the core chamber. It was a cathedral of light, a vast chamber where rivers of crimson converged into a single, seething heart. The hunger of the Vila radiated from it, overwhelming, suffocating. Morian's voice was a whisper. "This is it, strike here and they end." Rain raised his weapon, but before he could fire, the Vila spoke through the core itself. "Foolish creatures, you will burn with us. Without us, the stars will be empty. We are the memory of the galaxy. We are its truth." Rain's voice was steady, resolute. "No. You are its sickness, and humanity is the cure." He fired. The explosion shook the void. The source convulsed, its core unraveling, its veins collapsing inward. Across the galaxy, Vila ships froze, their power draining, their crimson light fading. Leviathans shuddered and cracked apart. Entire fleets went dark, their hunger silenced forever. The Vila screamed, a cry that echoed across the stars, then fell into silence. The source imploded, collapsing into a singularity of light and ash, devouring itself in a storm of fire that consumed everything around it. The iron wind barely escaped the blast, dragging Rain, Morian, and the survivors back aboard. They watched from the viewport as the last of the Vila burned away, their so-called eternity reduced to nothing. And in the silence that followed, humanity stood alone, victorious. Epilogue, the new dawn, the war was over. Humanity, scarred and battered, looked to the stars with new eyes. Worlds lay in ruin, fleets shattered, billions dead. But for the first time in the history of the galaxy, the Vila were gone. Humanity had defeated the eternal. Humanity had broken the cycle. Centuries later, the war was remembered not as a tale of despair, but of triumph. Statues of Elia's reign and Aleth Morian stood on a dozen worlds, reminders of the day humanity rose from prey to predator, from victim to victor. Children studied the Vila not as gods, but as relics of arrogance. And humanity, united as never before, spread across the stars, not as conquerors, but as guardians, determined never to allow such hunger to rise again. In the ashes of the First War, a new truth was written across the stars. Humanity endures. Humanity rises. Humanity leads.